There have been some major changes in the latest draft of the Lokpal bill, which will be tabled in Parliament on the 9th of December. That's this Friday. Let's just go across to Sunetra Chaudhary for more on the key contentious points. Sunetra, the key points, of course, has been about the CBI, how independent it will be, about the Prime Minister's inclusion and lower bureaucracy. What's the news you've got?
Well, first of all, the Prime Minister's bit. The report, which is 200 pages long, is very clear. They say they couldn't come to an agreement on that. So the three basic points that were coming out, some people said that keep the Prime Minister out completely. Second point, keep the Prime Minister in completely without any kind of, any kind of precursors on that. And third point, to include the Prime Minister under Lokpal, but only after he demits office. All three are being passed down, and they're saying, let Parliament decide. That's what the final draft says on the Prime Minister's inclusion. What's interesting and likely to be contentious is the one that government said, of course, that CBI, there is no way they will give up CBI's control. CBI has to be autonomous. What's interesting, though right at the beginning, one of the clauses recommends that CBI will keep its independence and will be independent both from the ministry and administrative and the government and also from the Lokpal. But that same set of recommendations then goes on to say that when CBI files its final report, at that time, it has to be done, whether they're closing or they're filing a charge sheet, it has to be done with the approval of the Lokpal. That, my CBI sources say, is completely giving up control. That says that Lokpal will have control if they're deciding whether to charge sheet and whether the final report has to be with approval. That is a sign of control. So it's likely to be the next flashpoint.
Right. That, of course, will continue. And we've heard, Sunetra, that back-channel negotiations on between some government ministers and some members of Team Anna. But tell me, politically, what's interesting also is what's likely to be the drama over the inclusion of the Prime Minister, because we know that Standing Committee new draft report, the story you broke earlier, says that it will be left to Parliament to decide. The Standing Committee is given three options, but also the Prime Minister likely to have a bit of drama or that on the floor of the House if it functions. What have you heard on that?
Well, what's interesting is that when the draft concludes, it says that nothing that we say will be in contradiction to the statements on this made in the floor of the House by the Finance Minister. So it's interesting that initially what the government had also said, when the first round of negotiations happened, at that time there seemed to be a kind of consensus on the fact that the Prime Minister will be included. But because there has been so much kind of disagreement on this in the Lokpal panel, what our sources are telling us that perhaps we'll see a grand gesture and a Prime Minister standing up in the House and saying that he doesn't mind being included. What's important to note also, it's something that the Prime Minister has said before as well, but it's the others in the government, other sections within the government which have not approved of it. But perhaps to reach some kind of peace with Team Anna and to come to an agreement with them, this kind of gesture can be anticipated.
Right, Sunetra, thanks so much for that update. That exclusive there from the new draft committee report. And of course, some important riders will include, of course, that the Prime Minister will not be held accountable for cabinet ministers' decisions. Well, let me go across an interview I did a short while earlier this evening with Mr. Abhishek Singhvi. Abhishek Singhvi, of course, chairman of that standing committee, which is looking at the final Lokpal draft. I began by asking Mr. Singhvi, well, on Sunetra's report, the major concessions there regarding the CBI, the Prime Minister and lower bureaucracy. Mr. Singhvi, I know you won't confirm or deny this, but are you happy that the CBI or the retweaked version of what's written in this new draft actually makes the whole bill draft stronger?
Sonia, you know the answer and you are still persisting with the question. You have a right to commit breach of parliamentary privilege. I certainly am not thinking of anything of the sort. These are your speculations based obviously on various versions floating around, because they are circulated for adoption tomorrow. Just be patient for a very short while, perhaps 48 to 72 hours. You'll have the report. All I can say is that between the last meeting and tomorrow, the only changes are those which were specifically finalized, concluded, sealed at the last meeting.
Yes.
And nothing new. Now what they are going to be, I'm not at liberty to say, but I can tell you there's a very satisfactory set of reasons given for each recommendation in great detail, in an argumentative manner, seeking to persuade. It is not just a fiat or a conclusion.
And of course, this bill will have to be debated on in Parliament. But let me ask you, Mr. Singhvi, were you disappointed by the strong reactions that came after the first draft was made public? Did you feel there was a misunderstanding? We know that many MPs within the standing committee, BJP MP Kirti Azad has himself submitted 18 dissenting notes on the final recommendations of that time.
There is no question of being disappointed or angry at dissenting notes. They are a part of the committee's procedure. As you know, the committee gives the consensus reflected on the committee, which is obviously by an overwhelming part of the 31 members. It also gives the dissenting notes.
No, but
One second.
Yes.
It also gives the dissenting notes. And there is no question of that being wrong in any way. Yes, you are right that it is very disappointing, indeed completely unacceptable. And this I am saying on behalf of the entire committee, not on behalf of dissenting members or majority members, etc. It is extremely regrettable, to put it mildly, that just because we on the committee don't speak out on the merits till the report is presented, others, including Team Anna, can go out and say what they like, abuse personally, vilify, attribute motives. This is a democracy, and it cannot be that unless and until a parliamentary committee passes a lock, stock and barrel Jan Lokpal draft, it is your way or the highway. And that is, I think, for such senior people,
yes,
it doesn't suit, it doesn't look good to do that.
Mr. Singhvi, let me ask you, you've talked about abuse personally, but let me ask you that today you met the Vice President, you've got a 2 days extension, the bill will now be tabled on the 9th of this month. You had asked initially for a week. Now, we've already heard reactions coming in, people asking, some members of Team Anna, Aruna Roy as well, saying, is this a delaying tactic? Will the bill not be passed this session?
I'm leaving it to your good sense. I think the answer is obvious in the question. I mean, is this not hyperbole? Is it not losing a sense of balance? There is a formal procedural extension sought on account of the fact that more than a month ago, expiry date of the term of this committee was 7th of December. Now, the committee is meeting for adoption on 7th of December. We have to bind, print, publish, translate the volumes. If for that 2 or 3 days extension is given, are we being some kind of megalomania that we are saying that it's delay? And please tell me which committee has done a task of this magnitude in 2.5 months flat.
NDTV's cricket app, Android and iPhone, fastest scorecard, special analysis, and much more. Download free. NDTV.com/apps.